Christian Eucharist promises a lot and delivers very little in terms of, in other words, you have to believe to get much out of the Christian Eucharist. And if you believe, then you may get, you won't get a psychedelic experience, but you will get something, an affirmation of faith or a feeling that you're, in communication with the Creator. Frankly, to be honest, I don't believe. I was raised Catholic, but it never made any sense to me, and so I don't believe, so I can't really tell you what a devout Christian gets from the Eucharist. What's different about psychedelics is they do deliver something, they deliver an experience if they're taken in the right set and setting, and I think one of the main things that sets them aside from, or that distinguishes them from the Eucharist is you don't have to believe. In fact, I tell people faith is not necessary, to experience what psychedelics have to teach. In fact, that's an impediment. Get rid of your faith. Approach it like a scientist, You don't have to believe. You can be as skeptical as you want. You can take the substance in, you can experience it, and you can make your own judgments what it's about.
If Paul and other people are eating the body of the God and having incredible visionary, Paul says, again, it just completely contradicts the idea of a historical Jesus, because he says, everything I know about Jesus came to me by revelation. Where's this coming from? What is the source of his experiences? I wouldn't be at all surprised. A chap called John Allegro many years ago wrote a book, The Sacred Mushroom and the Cross, which was about precisely this. He believes that the cultic meal of sharing the book was people getting together and eating some psychoactive substance together and having revelations of the Holy Spirit, what have you. So I'm open to any investigations and whatever evidence comes up. I think it's, through personal experience myself, one of the most powerful ways to, Aldous Huxley himself, where in is it Heaven and Hell?
Doors of Perception.
Doors of Perception. When he looks at the bamboo chair, I think it is, and he says, and this is a man who spent his entire life writing about the religious traditions of the world, the mystical traditions of the world, but he never actually had an experience. And here he was on mescaline, I believe, looking at this chair suffused with light, and he says, here all these words that people had used before, like grace and all these suddenly I was having that experience.
Alan Watts the same, again a great scholar, actually had the experience in this way. So if that's happening to people today, I think we can safely assume it's been happening to people for a very, very long time.
Yeah.
Shamanism is like a universal human dispensation wherever people live in connection with their native land, and it doesn't have to be through plants either. There are tribes that don't use plants, that just do all-night ceremonies, ritualistic drumming. There are all sorts of different ways to get people into altered states, and actually we're learning more and more about brainwave patterns and theta states and alpha states and so on. So and I think that as Andrew Weil talks about, the desire, the sort of almost the necessity for people to change their consciousness and experience other states of consciousness seems to be very basic to our human nature. And if people aren't given constructive and creative outlets for those types of experience, they'll choose destructive and negative ones, just because it's just almost natural that we would want to have different types of consciousness experience.
Anybody's experience, their subjective personal experience of the mystical, has to be considered valid in some respect. They may have a different deterministic screen, a set of words that they use to describe these mystical experiences, and maybe sometimes We don't always agree with those because of the baggage that's associated with them. But we still have to be open to the truth from those experiences before we completely just throw the baby out with the bathwater.
A mystical experience by any means whatsoever, you know. And if you can do Sufi dancing and attain a state of mystic bliss by finding your center and being a vortex, like a gyroscope of being, you know, I think there are numerous ways that people sort of align themselves with this mystic reality. But I happen to think that entheogens and psychedelics are a powerful way that could more safely be integrated into, you know, the sort of initiatory experiences that people call into their lives and stuff. And I think that the usefulness of the substances may eventually, as if humanity can evolve itself and mature itself, there may be an application, you know, in the future for these substances.
And it's that ability to take what works and leave behind. That's what the evolution of culture is. But you don't abandon the past, all the beautiful music and the buildings and the traditions. We just see it differently.
When the Spanish Inquisition got to the New World and they found these Aztecs, you know, eating mushrooms and having a jolly old time and having these ecstatic experiences and all that, I mean, as if that wasn't bad enough, but then they were calling it the flesh of the gods. Teonanacatl was the Aztec term for the mushrooms, which meant flesh of the gods. And this just enraged the clerics, and they just, you know, this was like so blasphemous, it couldn't be tolerated. And so they really, you know, reacted more brutally than they might have otherwise reacted to try to suppress this thing, because, you know, they just couldn't have this kind of thing. The parallels were too striking. And their Eucharist didn't do much, and the Aztec Eucharist, you know, delivered big time. So that was another reason why it had to be suppressed.
With the communion, where you take the wine and the bread, it works for people because it's done in a ritual context. People do have profound experiences, but I think very often, certainly over time, you know, it's a bit of a letdown, really. What is probably the case originally is that the wine would have been suffused with something, and also that the bread itself, there's a psychedelic fungi.
Well, that's where LSD is synthesized from ergot of rye.
Yeah.
And they believe that at certain points, when the bread was infected, and the medieval St. Vitus dance, for example,
yeah,
if the funguses attack the crop before it's turned into bread, the bread itself
becomes psychedelic.
And there were many eruptions in the Middle Ages, in particularly damp summers, when the ergot would flourish, when people would go kind of crazy.
If Jesus, say, were a shaman or a hierophant, which in the Greek terms, what he was, a revealer of the mysteries, and he had a mystery, he said, I have a mystery, and he revealed